Okay, so today we're going to talk about your favorite subject, gaslighting.
Oh, yay.
Right? Gaslighting, the issue of gaslighting drives me nuts when I read about it online, because what the non-narcissist, you, doesn't usually know is that this is an unconscious defense mechanism. So literally, because the narcissist unconsciously is shaming out, their brain feels so fearful and so hyper aroused at the thought of you confronting me about something that my brain, and when I would look back, I remember you would point out to me, like, how did you just turn that whole conversation around? And I remember you used to try to say to me, honey, okay, you can have your time to tell me what's bugging you about me, remember? And you're like, but now it's my turn, my turn.
Yeah, my turn, I get it.
I get a turn.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, but I started my turn, and now you're talking about me again. And I would marvel at, how the heck is that happening? Like, how are we talking about you again? But my brain would, in this panic, would just flip it around and kind of like, well, you do it too, or you do this, or you do that. So how was that for you? That must have been pretty awful.
Yeah. Finally we have a term to describe when that happens, and it's called gaslighting. And I didn't know for the longest time what gaslighting was, and you would see it on social media, and I'm like, I don't know what gaslighting means. It reminded me of something you would do in San Diego down in the gaslight district, right? That's where my mind took me, and then you explained it to me one day, and I went, oh yeah, I remember that. Again, probably the initial response that one has is frustration, which usually graduates, with honors to anger. And then the next thing, there you go, you're in the middle of a fight. And I think the insidious part about it is the project originally might have been to drain the swamp, but now we're just swatting alligators, and we're talking about anything else but draining the swamp. And so that can be highly frustrating. And as much as you weren't aware that you were doing it in the beginning, I wasn't aware that that was taking place. I would stop and go, wait a minute. I thought we were talking about this. How do we get this subject off of that and over to this, if that makes sense? And what I would tend to do is I'd go, okay, how do I, strategically plan to take care of this issue? And I can't even think of an example right now because it's been so long ago, but maybe there was something that wasn't going well between us. And so I go, okay, I'm going to let her point out 5 things that I'm not doing right? And then I just want to have the one. Thinking that was a good strategy and a good tactic. And so I would do that, but what I didn't realize at the time is how adept you were at being able, because you'd had a lot of practice at it, and my new strategy was, very green, if you will. And then you would turn whatever we were talking about back to something that I was doing wrong. And even if I conceded that point, okay, I'm doing that wrong, but listen, and I'll work on it, but I want to go back to what we originally talked about. And
what
so,
you're doing wrong.
Right, and so then, but it was too easy for you to scuttle the boat. You had kept in your library something that was a trigger for me, and if it got too uncomfortable for you, you could just reach into that library, throw that grenade, pull the pin, throw the grenade, and then you would scuttle the conversation. And so we would never talk about it. We would just end up in a fight, and it would be so all over the place that we could never pin down what we were talking about.
Right. And so did you have the impression, like most people online, that I was like doing that consciously?
Oh, of course.
Right.
And that was the problem is I was taking it personal, and then I was actually beginning to do some of the behaviors that you were doing. So, worst case scenario, if you felt like I was getting too close to maybe an intimate conversation, then you could just make a statement about me. And many times afterwards, I would tell you the statement that you'd make, and you say, well, I was just mad. I didn't really feel that way. Well, I used to say, well, you must have felt that way at the time. And I over time, I realized that you didn't feel that way. It was just your defense mechanism. And actually, that clued me in, because you would just scuttle the boat by making something personal, saying, well, you're just like your dad, or something like that, whatever trigger I might have. And then I would retaliate back with an anger statement back, say something about you, and then it was lost, because now we weren't talking about anything. We were talking about what I said to you. My return volley to you is what the subject became about. And I would say, do you remember what you said that preceded that? You insulted me, so I insulted you back. And you had no memory of that. You just were camping out on what I said in retaliation.
Exactly. And then I remember that you would end up apologizing. I didn't apologize,
yeah, there was that
but
part, yeah.
It would end up with you apologizing, and whatever you were trying to bring to me would get completely lost. And I think at some point, I just remember seeing this look on your face, like, let's just move on, because we could fight for 4 hours, a few days, and eventually it just wasn't worth it to him to keep trying to make these points. And what you're saying is what I realized eventually was I was going into fight or flight. And so that fight or flight, then you end up, attacking, and the person becomes the enemy in your mind. But I literally, when you kind of pointed out to me that I wasn't listening, I wasn't, letting you share about your feelings in the relationship, I remember trying so hard, and to not gaslight was impossible for me. And this is what I try to explain to people. It is an unconscious defense mechanism. It's like you momentarily feel fear, like, you feel overexposed. You feel scared because the person's mad at you, they're bringing up something. Again, you were raised to believe you're not supposed to make mistakes, so you just sheer panic. There's no concept of everybody makes mistakes, and you just apologize and you move on. And in fact, I remember, speaking of that, do you remember the day when I remember you said to me, could you just apologize? Oh no, I said to you, what? You want me to admit it so you can just shame me to death? And remember you said, no, I just want you to admit what you did so you can apologize and we can move on with our day. And I remember going, what? I go, that's a possibility. I said, is that an option? And you said, yes, absolutely. And I was like, what a concept. I had to think about that for the longest time, because I was like, if that was a concept instead of these 4-day fights, wow, I still couldn't do it for a long time until I, worked on my own shame, my own sense of self, healing. But now, I look at things now that my sense of self is healed, how easy it is just to go I'm sorry. And we do move on. And things are 2 minutes that used to be 2 days.
Right. Well, what's interesting is, now I'm going to fast forward a little bit. In the early days, I thought, she's hearing me. How do I know that? How do I know that? She would respond with, out of defensiveness. So I knew she heard me. And I used to think, but she's not listening to me. So, she's hearing what I'm saying, but she's not listening, not understanding. Well, that was an erroneous assumption on my part in the beginning. And, when you fast forward later, I went, well, if she's hearing and not listening, if she wasn't listening, it wouldn't have torched her off the way that it did. So it is getting in there. But I wonder why it's having that effect. And that was sort of the road to, figuring this out, and then figuring out that you were acting one way and feeling another.
Right.
And I think that's really the crux of this whole conversation is who I was seeing and what you were doing, your behaviors. You're
seeing all the self-righteousness.
Right.
And we're not seeing the shame.
No, I wasn't seeing the shame, but I went, she is listening, because if she wasn't, then they wouldn't get so mad. Right. So, and that just was kind of the logic and of the whole situation. So, if somebody's out there and you're going through what I went through, and if they're really reacting or overreacting, mm-hmm. or doing some of these things, and you're frustrated because you're saying, they're not listening to me. They're just not, I don't exist in this, which is a lonely, hard place to be.
Right.
You have to kind of change your thinking and go, wait a minute, if that was true, then they wouldn't react like this. And because I love you and I loved you, and I went, if I really care, I got to be careful that I don't make this about me and me being heard and me being listened to and me. I have to look about what she's going through, and that's difficult when you're mad. And the part of the gaslighting is when we first would do this, you didn't really want me to understand you either, because
I didn't understand myself.
Yeah, but I think even if you do, and that's just something you got to go work on, and really you got to go look in the mirror.
Right, and at Narcissist, your biggest fear is that that the person's going to be able to see you. You don't know yourself. You don't know who you are. And it's terrifying. Yeah. And that's why intimate relationships is the scariest, because you kind of get this creepy feeling like the person might see you, might know you better than you know yourself, which is absolutely, it's terrifying.
Well, the irony of that is there are things I don't see about myself that you do, and vice versa. That's already occurring anyway, right? That's one of the things.
It's a natural.
Yeah, and we don't really see ourselves as accurately as we.
Right.
That's for narcissists, non-narcissists. That's as far as I can tell.
Right.
So.
But you know what I was thinking too, when I hear my clients who are the non-narcissists, when they're feeling like this person doesn't care about what I'm thinking, mm-hmm. what they don't realize is the narcissist cares way too much what you're thinking.
Right.
And that's why they're reacting so big and so bad, because in reality they're trying to regulate their own sense of self off of your sense of self. If you're mad, they can't self-regulate, and they just feel terrified that you're having like negative thoughts.
Just think of all the fun we would have missed if we would have started with that.
I know, right?
right?
We fought for years.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just, I look back and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
But what's interesting, I think, about what you're, part of that struggle is, I don't think I ever worried when we were mixing it up a little bit. What I would worry about is when I would win the arguments, and I would, stack the bricks in such a way where you went, oh man, I'm caught on this one. You weren't ready to deal with that, and you would go silent. And that was, a whole nother bridge we had to cross.
Well, then I could go into that narcissistic collapse. Because sometimes you start to get a glimmer of the reality, and then you just collapse because you don't have the capacity to hold the reality. Then you kind of go wounded away into a shame spiral. But I remember that poor Danny, he might have to then come 2 days later and just be really kind, and he'd start off with an apology, even if it was all me. I should have been the one apologizing or coming back. He could tell I had no capacity to come back. If I was I'm gonna go sleep on the couch, I'd stay on the couch. I would have lived on the couch, because I didn't have a concept. I didn't have the capacity to get off the couch and go let's repair this. Let's work on this. He'd have to come and be honey, it's okay. I still love you.
Well, the good news about the non-narcissist is the narcissists usually can trigger you enough that you will say things that you regret. And so you do have something to apologize about. So you can model good behavior usually because of that. So there was that too. So,
right, which it was helpful though. I was so grateful though that you came back even when it, it could have been 3/4 of me, but you would just come back and apologize, and because I just wasn't capable, and you kind of kept the relationship going. And I hear that in my non-narcissistic clients that they'll say to me like, wait, you're still telling me that I'm going to need to do like more of the work and I'm like, yep, for a while, like this person does not have the capacity. They can't come back.
Those dreaded wedding vows anyway, huh?
Right, better or worse.
Well, but the noise is definitely better than the silence, wouldn't you say? I think for both of us. Because you were never so miserable.
Yeah.
You would be silent, or you'd go give me the silent treatment. And then if I was particularly angry with you about something, I learned, well, you know what? I'm just going to go silent because that really bothers me when she goes silent. And then I would go silent, and oh boy, that didn't work. That's the worst thing that NN can do, is to go silent on the, because it would remind me sometimes when I look back at it, not at the time, but when I look back at it, is sometimes I was throwing you a lifeline, and you acted like you didn't want that lifeline,
Right.
And so I went, well, then I'm not going to throw you that lifeline. I'm not going to engage since you don't want the lifeline. Mistake.
Because I think too, what the non-narcissist doesn't know. I remember one time you said to me, "Are you pouting?" Like, because you're just like, and are you
Did
pouting?
I say that?
Yeah,
Really?
you said, "Are you pouting?" And are you purposely not speaking to me, and like giving me a silent treatment? And I remember going, "Am I?" Because that sounds kind of like a 5-year-old.
But you didn't say that out loud.
I didn't say any of that out loud. I just started thinking inside my head, and I was like, "What is happening?" And then I realized, no, when I felt injured, I would go onto my narcissistic island where I felt safe again. But then I'm like alone, I'm safe, and I'm also kind of like drowning, so to speak. But that's where, like, if you didn't come get me and bring me back into life and relationship, I would just retreat there and stay there. But it's really because I felt unsafe, that like, I didn't have the capacity to have these healthy conversations. And at some point, you lobbed something at me. I got hurt. Of course, then it became all about me. But then, or if you were like mad at me and you were not going to speak to me, I didn't have the capacity to like go get you. I would just literally retreat and kind of collapse more. Except for that, there's times when another term that is misunderstood dramatically online is this love bombing thing. Love bombing is when, like, there were times when you were distant enough that after a few days, narcissists are terrified of intimacy because, we're so scared we don't know ourselves. So we're scared of other people just seeing us and connecting with our heart. We're not connected with our heart. And so a lot of times once there's enough space and distance, then we will like be like a little tortoise and we stick our head out and we're like, "Hey, how are you?" As long as you're not mad. But if there's been like enough distance, then I could be like, "Hey, you want to go out to dinner? You want to spend some time?" Right, literally. And just literally, and people will think the narcissist is manipulating in that case. But then you hear the non-narcissists usually say, "But they seem so genuine. They seem so loving, so like their intentions were so good." And I'm like, no, that's their real self, because there's not so much intimacy, there's not so much fear in the way that now they're like coming at you. Well, then of course, once you would warm back up and be super emotionally present, I'd get terrified and I'd go put my like turtle head back into my shell and retreat.
Yeah, which, I'm fairly sociable and direct and in your face, and what do you call it? Present? I'm very present.
Yeah, very emotionally present.
Which always, you had issues with
terrifying,
that.
terrifying.
Which always used to make me, well, why'd she marry me? Because I'm gonna be, I'm like we have a German short hair, and when she says hello, she's got to have her face right in your face until, you just might as well let her do it, because she's not going to let up until you give her 12 seconds in your face, right? I was a little bit like that with you. I liked being close and talking to you, and remember I used to say, give me a penny for your thoughts, and you're like, oh, please don't say that. And I'm like, no, I really want to know I'm interested in you. I really want to know what's going on. And I thought, well, that's what this woman wants, right? Well, you did.
My real self did.
But you didn't.
I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know how to take it in.
Yeah, it was really confusing and hard to work through. That was, that's where I think the end can get very lonely.
Right.
And confused because of the mixed signals that you would say.
Well, and I think, too, it's really painful when, so say I'm like, let's go out to dinner, let's like connect. And then when you respond, and then I unconsciously become terrified again and I retreat, I have spouses say to me all the time, I feel like I just got totally manipulated. I feel like they just did that just to get him back in my good graces again. And like now they're just being the same jerk that they always are. And I'm like, I can so see how it looks like that, and it must have just felt like so hurtful.
Well, hurtful, and then, almost everybody has, when they're hurt, they respond in anger. At least, that's one of my mechanisms, right? But I would look at you as weaponizing your emotions with me, or your intimacy, because I thought, okay.
You thought I had control of it.
Well, yeah, of course, because you're articulate and you were so sweet. And I'm like, okay, good. We're going to go out to dinner and we're good. And let's hold hands and talk. And then, the better the conversation was going, the more nervous you were getting under the surface. And then, okay, with that, you had finally had enough of that. And then you would say something or do something that would put the brakes on that.
Right.
And so then I would go, she did that on purpose, and now she's weaponizing this. It's a weapon. She's using that not only to control, but to get back at me. So maybe she really isn't ready to come to the reconciliation part. She's just getting me close enough to take a couple more whacks at me over the last fight, and so, I thought that was particularly egregious.
Exactly. And this is what's on the internet, is that all these people saying, and you have a few pop psychologists who have it wrong too, because they don't understand it. And they're saying the narcissist is like manipulating you. They're doing this to purposely draw you back in and then swipe at you and stuff. And it's all unconscious. It's literally unconscious. And when I explain that to the non-narcissistic spouse, it starts to make a lot of sense to them. They start to go, that makes more sense, because he or she like really did seem genuine. But you want to go out to dinner, that you like warm me back up. That really felt so sincere that I didn't feel like I was being played. But then, later you're like, what was that? Why are you, push pull.
It reminds, I think when I look back at what I thought a narcissist was and what people think, you think like they're kind of a biting dog. And so just to stick with that analogy for a little bit, I remember as a kid we had a dog. His name was Coon, and he got into a porcupine, and he was the sweetest dog. Wouldn't bite anybody, but I'll tell you, when we were pulling those quills out, it was causing him a great deal of pain. He was trying to bite us, and I think that's what you have to understand about narcissists. It's a reaction. They're going to bite because you're pulling the quills out when you're getting close to them, when you're getting intimate, when you're doing those things. And that took 11 years to kind of figure out with you is,
that love causes pain.
That's right. That's right.
The non-narcissist wants to
and yet the
heal.
Dog needs those quills taken out.
Right.
And you need that love, and you need that that intimacy. And yet it's causing pain. And of course, that's what you're qualified to talk about, and that's what your book does, is talk in depth about the narcissist. But you're right, everything I see on like TikTok or anything, boy, they really vilify the narcissist, and with a total lack of understanding. Why would you put a dog down euthanize it because it's trying to bite you when you're pulling quills. Well, you wouldn't. Well, why would you vilify a narcissist for, being in defensive mode all the time?
Because they're not realizing that the narcissist is in pain. It's a trauma response. Yeah. And the narcissist made a vow sometime in childhood or adolescent, like never to let love in again, because when they were vulnerable, it was dangerous. The world was dangerous. People were not able to respond in ways that made them feel safe, and eventually they came to hate their own needs, hate their own desire for love, and they at some point made a vow to like never need that again. So then when love, which they really do want and really do know they need, comes their way, they're attracted to pretty high functioning, pretty healthy people a lot of times. You see so many partners and spouses of narcissists are pretty intact, healthy, nurturing people. And that's because we want that. Our real self, that our development stopped getting developed, really wants that. And yet our defense mechanisms just get scared and yet won't allow it. Won't allow it. And so much of narcissism treatment is to slowly help us, realize how to like let down the defense mechanisms, build that healthy self, realize like love is not dangerous anymore, and then how to like let those defense mechanisms down. But you can see how it does cause the non-narcissist a whole lot of pain, and it can be easy to like think that I was weaponizing things, or I was using things, or I was consciously manipulating.
Right. Which is really interesting now, again, thinking of it in retrospect. I used to think that you were selfish. Right. And, anybody that knows you is, next to my mom, you're the most generous person I've ever known in my life. Your kids know you as being generous. So, you can't, it's amazing with the narcissist when you really figure out who they are, and they a lot of times won't show you, but when you really figure out who they are, I think you'd be really surprised, so. And of course I saw glimpses of that when we met, I remember, I don't know if you remember when we were dating, but I would tell you jokes and I'd say, yeah, that was a hilarious joke and I'm funny, why aren't you laughing? And you went, oh, I am. I said, well, your face doesn't show it, And you went, really? And I went, oh, wow, there's somebody in there that I can't wait to get to know. And that was the challenge. That's what attracted me to you. Little did I know.
I didn't know. It was going to take years. It was going to take years for us both to get to know that person inside. But that's where a lot of times the non-narcissist is beating themselves up saying like, what kind of an idiot am I? Why did I pick this person? And I'm like, because you saw the good.
I just wanted to, for the record, I never said that. I never said, what an idiot am I? Why did I pick this person?
That's great, because a lot of my clients they've just wondered about themselves,
Yeah, I think a lot of that's frustration. And a lot of it should be just because they probably haven't come to that point in that relationship where they really understand the other side.
But the person's not conscious.
But of course, to be fair to the in isn't going to be able to do much until the narcissist decides to do what you did, and that's to go do something about it. And so without that, we probably would still be fighting. Right.
Because
because you decided to go do a hard, brave thing and get it out right now. If I was a narcissist in this and you were the non, I don't know. I don't know that I would have done what you. I think the non-narcissist is actually probably the easier route in this.
I remember he used to tell me like, I'm a really brave person, but he's like, for you to go and do therapy and like face like all the demons inside of you, he was like, that takes courage. Yeah. And I remember just going like, I couldn't even hardly articulate, but I'd be like, thank you for saying that, because I was terrified. It was a very terrifying experience, and it was so nice for you to like acknowledge because it did take a lot of courage.
And my stepfather, God rest his soul, he was a narcissist, and he struggled. And you know, when he was dying and he was sick, you know, it was really interesting to see that process and to see that that unfolding and to release some of those narcissistic tendencies that he picked up from his mother. Just to watch that was helpful for me to see as well. You know, and to see it in the opposite sex too, to see it in males it is different. Some parts are different. I mean, would you agree with that? Typically, I think a male narcissist probably acts just a hair different in certain ways than a female does. All the mechanisms are the same, but
we get socialized differently.
So it's not quite the same, but it's close enough that they're all apples anyway.
Right.
And then, was there another question that you had?
Nope. Let's go ahead and wrap it up for today, because then the other one's going to be like a whole different subject. So,
what are we going to look at next time?
I think we're
Do you know?
Good. I don't know. I'm ADHD. I'll have to look. I'll have to look on my.
Oh, you're not going to give me a clue. So you're going to spring this on me when we said
list.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bye for now.